Hello, this is Dale Matthews. It's Inside News, and normally Mike Jones is with me here. He probably will be here tomorrow night, but he's been spending a little time with his family, which is a nice thing. And tonight's guest is Lily Morgan, who really ripped it up in the commissioner's race. And now we hope to spend some time with her and the other candidates, maybe a couple of times a month, and just talk about some of the basic issues, the ones and zeros, the yeses and nos, when it comes to being a county commissioner. Hello, Lily.
How are you, Dale?
I'm doing okay. So you just walked in the door. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. Yes, I work usually between 8:30 6 o'clock. So
Whoa.
Just getting off work. So.
Right, and I'm just starting work, so except for going to commissioners' meetings. One of the things that's going to happen is after you've been in office, the very first weekly business session, there's going to be people that come to the podium and say, hey, congratulations for getting elected. I'll be there videotaping, if nothing else. And if I walk up to the podium at that time or another time, you probably know the general gist of the kind of question that I may ask you and the other commissioners, right?
Sometimes, not always. I think that you get questions that come up that surprise people sometimes.
That's true. Yeah, that's good. Yes, I do. Most of my questions have been about the process. Nothing about you or about other commissioners. Well, maybe something about other commissioners. I'm not always expecting a government to be brilliant, but I do like it when they obey the law. I think it's a pretty important thing. And something we talked about with Dan 2 days ago is I said, there are plenty of times with this group of commissioners, for some reason, the three of them, where they've decided that following the law, really, really simple laws, like please tell us what you're going to be talking about at this meeting, just it's something that they don't want to do. They're not confused about the law. I know that because I've talked to each of them about it and have given them a copy of the law. And the law is just simple, saying, tell people what you're going to talk about, post the minutes of the meeting. These are all things that are required. And it shouldn't even be really necessary, in my opinion, to tell people to do that. They should just want to do it. Would you generally agree with that?
Generally, I would, absolutely. I think where some things come into confusion is when the law has been overturned by case law or judicial process or state law, or if there's conflicting laws where federal says something, state says something else, local says something else. So then people maybe disagree on which law they have to follow. But as a general rule, our charter is our guideline, and so long as it does not counter state law and federal law, that is what our authority to exist is.
Well, there's no hidden agenda on this show. Not today. Maybe next time. No, this is real simple. What I'd like to ask you about is...
for the public meeting laws, you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to abide by getting an agenda out there. And I really, I found that it's not easy to get that information. When I first filed to be a candidate for city council, I was immediately added to the distribution list of all the city meetings and agendas and workbooks and packets and all that kind of stuff. Just when I filed to be a candidate, even before I was elected, that was automatically done by the city staff so that I would have all the current information. And when I contacted the county, that's not something they do. I was just told I have to find out just like everybody else does. So I was curious about how the commissioners are notified ahead of time of things, or how the agendas are set, how that whole process is in place. And I really think that if the city can do it, there certainly means it can be done. And so the ability to have information out there sooner and easier to access. Now, the city also just went to a new notification system, and I think it actually got a little more complicated. You'll get an email of a news flash, but you have to click a button for additional information. Then it takes you to the city's website, and you have to click another button, and then you get the press release. I'd like to see if we can come up with a simpler process for the county so that information is readily available and not multiple steps. It's just there and easy to find.
I agree with you 100% that the city generally up until now has had a system where they give people maybe more information than they actually are asking for. But there are people who want to know what's coming up at the next meetings. I need to know, Mike needs to know, and we'd like to be able to track down what in the world happened at that meeting. And an example might be that you go to a meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago, and now suddenly, after a long time, I'm sorry, not suddenly, but after a long time, you finally get to see that the commissioners are going to approve the minutes. And I've said to them, as consumers, as people that are sitting in the audience, how are we going to know whether those minutes are right or not? How do we know? Because I'm sitting in the meeting. I know what was said and not said, and I have a videotape to compare it to. And everybody has an audio tape if they want to listen to the county's audio tape. And I've seen times when they used to discuss it in public, which they don't do now. Under Simon Hare, he insisted that it not be done in public, and that's truthful. He did do that, and they would argue about what should be in the minutes. And I remember specifically Simon saying, it doesn't matter who, but one of the commissioners saying, well, I don't like that in the minutes, but that's what you said. Yeah, but I don't like it in there. What? No, I don't want it to say that, even though that's what was said. And so we don't have access to those minutes until long after it's over, till people have forgotten the details. And I've said to the commissioners, well, why don't you post rough copy or draft, put draft all over it. Well, people will be confused. No, they won't. Not if you have draft printed in huge letters all over the front of it. So,
Gail, do you know who transcribes the minutes currently?
Yeah, they don't really transcribe them. They do transcribe them for the city, but it depends on which person is working at the moment. It's either Wendy Watkins, who does a really nice job and enjoys helping people in the audience, in the general population, or it's
she's the new senior administrator.
She's the new senior. Yeah, yes, she is. Or it's another person in the office who is a bitter pill, who doesn't like working with people, who will give you a rude answer 5 times out of 6 and doesn't like the work that she does. And so she's just not going to do it. And so that's where you end up with, for example, Lily Morgan stood and made a comment. Made a comment? That's it? Right.
So we need to know what the comments are. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, and that's, I do think that instead of some summary, they need to have the details. It is longer. It is expensive. I mean, you have to pay to have somebody transcribe the minutes. I know the city outsources it. I don't know if it's staff that does it or if it's outsourced to the county. But it is something that takes time and it is cost. But I still think it's more important to have accurate or have them linked online to the video. So if you want to look at this section, it takes you to where that video portion is, and you can see it yourself, you can hear it yourself. But it is not, it doesn't give you the tone, it doesn't give you the gist of the conversation if it doesn't have the details.
And many times I found when I first started taping these, I thought, like any sane person, I would think, is there really going to be any difference between the audio recording and the video recording? But what was happening, and I've never seen anything like this, Lily, I truly have never seen anything like this, where with the 3 commissioners that we have now, and we're saying goodbye to 2 of them, almost certainly goodbye to 2, that what would happen was occasionally you would see Cheryl Walker, as an example, and people who watch the show know this, pass a note to Keith Heck during the meeting. Hey, in the little back room. Now, you're never going to see that on the audio recording, obviously, but she's passing him a note, and then he looks at it, and then, I don't know, changes his vote, but it had some effect on what he was doing. Now, wait a minute. 1, that's illegal, and 2, that's not transparency, and it's just
it's subject to public meeting law.
Yeah,
where if it impacted a decision, open to the public for
Right.
viewing.
Well, now see, I requested that one in particular, and I've requested other ones since then. And what I was told is, one, it doesn't exist. There was no such thing. Okay, that's one answer I got. You wouldn't know, but I think you believe that I'm being truthful with you. Or two, you're going to have to pay for a copy of that. Really? As Simon Hare told me once, he said, it's going to cost you a lot of money to keep up with what we're doing, Mr. Matthews. Really? And now what's happened is, mostly Cheryl Walker insisted on this, all requests have to go through Wally Hicks. And the last time I asked for something from their office, they have 5 days. It doesn't take a lawyer to know this. I mean, the law is crystal clear. They have 5 working days to produce whatever document it is you're asking for, as long as it's not a secret document. And I asked for it, and more than 5 working days went by. And I said, whatever happened to that thing? Well, Wally decided you don't want that. So that system's not working well for me. And it's not working according to state law. Now, you wouldn't know if I'm being truthful with you or not, but that was the decision that was made. And so now there's another layer of bureaucracy, and I'd have to pay for it also.
Well, I do know they do have a right to ask people to pay for the copies that it would take to get that. So that being aside, that someone has to pay for the request. Even I've had to ask for police reports from other agencies and say, there's a process. I have to do it in writing and different things. I mean, so there's every agency is different on how they process that. But regardless, public record law is very strict, and it's very intentional that, and especially in the system with, like, while on city council, I passed a note to another counselor, in and of itself, it's not a quorum, because there's 8 counselors, and it's not me daisy chaining something around. But in the commission, when there is 2, that in and of itself is almost a meeting in itself when you're passing a note.
Correct.
And so it is subject to meeting law. It is subject to open record, and it would have to be retained. It would have to be available to the public, unless, like you said, it was something that was confidential, like an executive session kind of topic matter. But I think that the easiest way around that is not passing notes.
Right.
You're not willing to hold up and say, this is what this note says.
Talking with some of the previous commissioners of years gone by, decades gone by in one case, the fellow was telling me, he said, we wouldn't even get on the same elevator together. He said it wasn't because we were going to talk about county business, although that's pretty much all we had in common. He said the reason we wouldn't do it is to avoid the appearance that we were talking about county business on the elevator with, the doors closed and nobody else in the elevator. It just wouldn't be right.
Yep. I agree. That's it. You have to avoid the appearance that, you have to be so intentional as to not even allow an accusation to be made based on appearance.
There you go.
Even if the confidence or the conversation was completely unwork related, and you're asking how's your family or something like that has nothing to do with county business, for the most part, it's better to have above reproach.
I agree.
I'm not saying I tend to be somebody who asks how people's families are doing or how their weekends went.
Don't we all?
But it's one of those things that it's a completely different ballgame when it involves a quorum of 2.
Well, and this didn't just spring up out of nowhere or from hyper people, saying, hey, you're always saying no. It sprang up out of them actually talking about county business. There was a point here where I'd go to the meetings in the little back room, and they were upset because I was starting the camera before they called the meeting to order. Well, what I was finding in almost every meeting for a while, it didn't last forever, but almost every meeting, is they were talking about what they were going to do and what they were going to say and how they were going to vote before the recorder was turned on. And I was capturing that on videotape and playing it back. Well, they weren't happy, so they tried to make a rule that you can't start recording till we tell you can start recording. Oh, no. That wasn't going to work. And the only reason, what other reason could there possibly be? You can't start that recording, or as soon as the meeting's over, you have to immediately stop it. Why? There's only one reason.
Catching people saying things on camera that they thought weren't on camera has been something ongoing for people all over. So you have to live your life in a way that what is seen on and off camera makes no difference.
Right, and I'm not extolling the virtues of people who are creeping around with cameras and sticking them over your backyard and catching you sunbathing. There's some cases where that kind of makes me wince.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. But
no.
If the reality is when news media shows up at other locations, their cameras are going before things start. And
yes.
You see things before and after all the time. It's a part of reporting, that you're getting ready, your equipment's there. Mm-hmm. But the reality is the news media and the freedom of the press was protected because it was an accountability for government.
Yes.
And so that is a key element that shouldn't be forgotten. And the reality is also that, media sometimes doesn't report what actually happens. It gets a little sensational these days, but that doesn't take away the reason for it, and that's accountability, and accountability is a good thing.
I absolutely agree. Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that, and I would expect that you would say such a thing. One of the things that's been happening in the meetings, and this is going to be a super simple show. One of the things that's been happening is it's nice to have some clue as to what's going to come up at a given meeting. Now, when the meetings are in the little back room, I personally think they should all be in the Ann Basker, and it'd be simple to do that. But when the meetings are in the little back room, what's happened since Simon Hare has been a commissioner, and it's been a little over 5 years, is it's been changed around till now. It just says subjects of general interest. I'm not going to get the exact wording, but just they're just going to talk. Okay. Now
that's not notified. That's not actual notification of topic matter.
Thank you. No, it's not. And I remember being there a couple of times when I said, "Where's the agenda?" Well, we don't have an agenda. There's no agenda today. And I'm looking at a piece of paper that says agenda on it that they're referring to which they're referring. That's simply not honest. And it doesn't take a law degree to say, please tell that even though we can't comment, we used to be able to comment. Similar to what happens at city council meetings, not city council workshops, but city council meetings where you could comment on things throughout the meeting. And we used to be able to do that in the county. Now, since Simon has been here, we can't do that anymore. You're isolated to your 3 minutes per week, even if there's 8 topics or 0 topics. And there's no possibility at any time when you think about it to question anybody that's on the staff at all. Not ever. Because, well, generally, I mean, if they can do this, they prefer not to be questioned by the public. And so there are things that happen and you go, well, wait a minute. You didn't even tell us you were going to be discussing this. Some people might like to be in the audience. I know I'm kind of switching topics a little bit. People might like to be in the
notebook.
It's called what?
This is why I grabbed a notebook so I can keep up.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll switch back to the one thing. It's nice to know what they're going to talk about, even though you can't comment. And there's been many, many times where I'm sitting there, usually the only person in the audience with the camera. So this audience is sitting there with me. And I'm thinking, oh boy, those folks from Sunny Valley would really like to be here to hear this. Or other people, the marijuana advocates would sure like to be here to hear this. And so I tape it and I put it up and they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they talked about that. I didn't know. Well, you can't comment anyway. But there are people who have certain items that they're really interested in and they'd like to be there to see for themselves what the commissioners say, but it's not noticed. No, they didn't tell anybody that they were going to talk about that, even though many times, not every time, they knew they were going to talk about that. Your feelings about it in general?
my general feelings are is if you know something's going to be on there, you need to be as specific as you can about the topic on the agenda.
It's the law also.
It is the law. And, there's, I was talking to Harold Haugen about, doing county business and public comment. And, for me, that's the takeaway I got from it is we need to make more opportunities for the public to make comments to the commissioners, to be available to the commissioners to talk on things. Yes, it may drag things on longer. It may take more time, but maybe the frustration levels would go down if people felt they were heard.
Thank you. I believe that. Now, sometimes what the people have to say, honestly, just doesn't make any sense at all. I know this intensely. And, I'm hoping I'm not in that crowd, although I may occasionally be. Sometimes what the people are saying is kind of nonsense, but they are the public, and they did elect you, and they have a right to get up and talk about black helicopters flying over their house every day, if that's really what they want to say during their overall 3 minutes. Yes?
I don't know the specific roles I would want to see about having incorporated, but I do, for instance, is it the black helicopters flying over their house? Does that have anything to do with the county in any way? Can we find out? But the reality is we need to be willing to listen and and just take that, and then we can make exceptions with that, or not exceptions. See what we can have an influence over.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of somebody who, prior to me getting on city council, people said, "Don't listen to Rika Brown." And I got on there, and I just remember I didn't agree with everything she was said.
Right.
But it stood out to me. And today there's a dog park at the end of Greenwood Avenue because of Rika Brown.
Right.
And, it's just one of those things that people aren't going there and commenting to waste people's time. They're going there and commenting because they care about our community and they want to be heard. And if there's an ability to give more opportunity, now it might not be that it's the Wednesday weekly business session that changes the time frame. Maybe they have a time on Mondays that they specifically make themselves available for the public to come in and talk about anything. And before the decisions are being made,
yes,
they have a chance to be heard. And then when, just as many opportunities as we can, but all the meetings need to happen in public. I don't think the back room is necessarily a bad idea, but I don't think that it should be any different than Ambassador for filming it and having it publicized.
Yes.
They can have cameras in there just the same. So every meeting is as open to the public as any other meeting. But, there are needs for staff reports and that you get information that is not at the time necessarily public comment, but they
yes,
have to allow time for the public comment. You have to allow time for people to be heard. And I think that some of the frivolousness of some comments might reduce if they felt they were heard.
Boy, I definitely agree with you. Now, not specifically talking about you, but one of the caveats for the public, and especially for the viewers of this show, is that when Don Reedy was elected, he wasn't elected; he was appointed. He was appointed, right? And what he said when he was asking the commissioners to appoint him, he made it clear that he was 100% in favor of transparency. We're not going to find anyone more transparent than he. 2 days into his term, I got up and asked a question about something about procedure. It's usually about procedure with me, and about what the commissioners are doing. What is the plan? And his answer was, it's none of your business what we do as commissioners. So we don't know. I mean, I had a long conversation with this fellow, 45 minutes with him ahead of time, and seemed perfectly legit to me, like saying exactly the same kind of things that you're saying, not denigrating what you're saying at all. We just don't know what's going to happen till you actually get there, and you have done the things that you said you're going to do, so you've got a good track record on that. It's just once we've been burned a couple of times about this, we're saying, well, now, okay, that's terrific. This isn't nice, but I'm going to believe it when I see it. And I think I will with you. It's just you going even further than you normally would, avoiding the appearance, is really important right now, because there have been some times when it's just not been, where public confidence has been eroded for a reason and not just because of the mood of the nation.
Sure. I know that I'm not perfect. I know that I'm going to make mistakes, but I also believe in being accountable for my mistakes.
Yes, ma'am.
I publicly apologize before it's one of those things that I know that I can only live my life with the best intent that I can, with choosing integrity first. And for me, that has to be, I have to look myself in the mirror. So that's how I will live my life. And I will try to fight for that with the others. Unfortunately, you have two other people that will vote.
That's right.
So it's not something that one person has the power to change things. But I certainly think that there is an opportunity to set a standard. And, you've heard other people say it. It's not just at the local level. It's all the way to the national level. That people do not feel heard. They do not feel trust in their government. I can't change the mistakes of things in the past. I can't change the distrust and the mistakes that people have made in the past. But I can certainly say today, this is the standard. This is what we're going to do. And I'll hear you out if you let me know I'm not doing it right.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that's happened, one of the things you'll hear, depending on who makes it through the primary, one of the things you'll hear is, well, the public has ample opportunity to come to see us in the privacy of our offices, and we'll answer any questions that they have. I personally have a problem with that, and it's for very specific reasons. Because with two of the commissioners that we currently have now, when I went to go see them in their office, they later denied that certain things were said, and they were. Now, they've denied that things are on tape when they're on tape, so that's kind of what happens. But I don't get to that position until I've been burned a couple of times, and then I don't let it happen the third time. And so there may be some reticence on some people's parts. I'll give you an example of the person, but not the commissioner. Judy Aarons went in to go talk with one of the commissioners and brought cookies that she had made for the commissioner. And he ended up yelling at her in the office so much that we also have sources inside the commissioner's office. Of course we do. And the secretaries even noticed that he was yelling at her. Now, she's really soft-spoken, so this wasn't any knockdown, drag-out fight on both ends. And so he later denied that this had ever happened. If I were her, I would never go back to another meeting in the privacy of someone's office. One, if I'm going to get yelled at.
So safe. Yeah.
And two, if the person's going to later not tell the truth and deny that it ever happened. I have it from another source that, yes, indeed it did. So I'm just saying there may be some reticence. A normal human being would say, hey, give me a call or drop by the office. We could work this out. And that is a thing that a human being would do. It's not always a welcome alternative to people who've been through that before. You can't answer for the past, but
I know you're absolutely right. But I also know that not everybody is sitting in their office. I mean, there's things to be done around, so you're not always available.
Right.
So I think it's better to be intentional, to schedule into the weekly schedule times that all the commissioners are available.
Yes.
That somebody can approach and speak with all the commissioners, and that they have that opportunity to be heard. So
Yes.
There's no back doors. There's no behind the scenes. Unless those times are needed. And somebody might need to be able to give some information that they want the privacy. That's
Yes.
fine. Make an appointment. We'll make sure we're available, that kind of thing. I have to live by a schedule these days because my schedule is so extreme, but I live by my calendar. But at the same time, being more available to have open meetings with public access is critical.
Now, it's not really for everybody. I mean, there's plenty of people who have their tomato plants to worry about, and they don't care anything about county government whatsoever. And after you've been in office for 3 years, they're not going to know that you've been in office at all. Okay, I know that from seeing what's happened with other commissioners. Okay, so they've got their light to lead. But there are others who are paying attention to what's happening in local politics, who really would like to be informed about what's happening so we can kind of keep track of what's up and what's coming next. And so it is helpful, the details, for those of us who then turn around and try to distill that down to something that's conveyable to an audience, for one, or just to talk to your neighbors over the fence. It's nice to have the access to information. Let me give you an example of something that you're going to see that's going to happen right away. And I've heard commissioners complaining about it as well. A department head is going to come in first week, second week, and give you some information right there at the table, probably in the little back room for the very first time. And then say, well, this is really essential that you make a decision about this right away, or sure would be helpful. And so I've seen the commissioners sitting there at that table reading it and trying to make a decision based on the thing they've just now received. Well, there's all kinds of problems with that. One is the public certainly doesn't have a copy of it. Two, the commissioners are more likely than not to make a vote in the little back room based on information they just got. And three, how can anyone possibly be informed on that issue if they've just now gotten it?
So that would mean that department heads need to give the information to the commissioners in as much advance that they have time to read it. So by the time they give their presentation, it's not the first time they're getting the information. And then it can also have time that it can be part of public record and discussed before the meeting. Because right now they'll do the business meetings, or not the business meetings, they'll do the admin meetings, and then it'll come back before a weekly business session. But certainly, that's something I know we dealt with at the city side. We had to start saying, look, we're not getting enough advance warning before some of this. You put it up to the deadline where a decision needs to be made, and we haven't had enough time to go over it. And that can't. There's some things that state law dictates the time that a decision's made.
Yes.
But at the same time, then we need to work harder to have the information available sooner so we can make those deadlines with time to think about it and get back to it.
Well, I come from and you may disagree, and there's plenty of people who may disagree. I come from the background, from the theory that the public is the boss, and that you are the public servant. And therefore, the boss should be notified before anybody else. Because how's the boss going to be able to keep track of what you're doing?
I agree and I disagree.
Okay.
In the sense that it's representative.
Right.
So the public hired us to represent them on their behalf and serving the public. Absolutely, we're public servants. But at the same time, we're the keepers of the making sure that the accountability and the transparency and well, you're the accountability for us, but we're the ones to hold the department heads accountable.
Yes, ma'am.
And so it's one of those things that, I can't make a general statement that I'm going to know every circumstance that's going to come before the commissioners.
No.
Would to be advanced or not. But I, in the representative form of it, we certainly can say this isn't enough time. There needs to be public comment. There needs to be time for this to be notified and have it available. And I certainly think that's reasonable. But, it's at the end of the day, we do work for every individual that lives in this county. At the same time, we have to have function. And so that's why we have a representative form of government where we're elected to be administrators in the county. So long as we're doing that in a way that is serving the public's needs, then that every individual citizen doesn't have to show up at every meeting and say, this is the decision I want made.
Right. Well, I wanted to do this first one with you on something that was real simple, 1 and 0, yes or no. Is well, for example, if I say to you and I the same I did with Dan, are you a transparent person? Yes, I am. Well, okay, that's up to everyone's individual judgment about what does that mean. It's a completely different thing if I'm at a meeting and I'm looking and I'm reciting what has been made available to the public, and I say, these documents are not in the information you shared with us, so we have no idea what you're talking about on this subject item. It's either there or it's not there. It's the simplest thing in the world. It's either a 1 or a 0. It's a yes or a no. It's either there or it's not. Everybody can debate about what does transparency mean, but you can't debate when the document isn't there, or it's a black map with black writing and it's just a waste of toner because you can't see anything. It's just one big black page.
Yeah.
How does that even happen?
I think it happens where someone asks a question and it's interpreted in a way that someone, like, oh, hey, kid, should we do these in black and white copies? And, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Let's get it out there, and not realizing there's a color map in there. I think they happen as simply as that sometimes.
Well, I don't think it happens with Wendy Watkins, but I understand your point entirely. Wendy looks through this kind of stuff, and she's death on that. She does not allow that to happen.
Right, and that's why she's hired to be in the job that she's at.
Yes.
Now the lead administrative one, and she's going to do her job well, and she cares.
Yes.
That's what I see from her. So, but I also seen where in my job as a supervisor, someone will ask me a question and I'll make a decision, and then later I'll see something happen. So why are you not? Well, you said this. Well, that was something right there.
That's right.
And all of a sudden you realize I need to make sure that I'm not just making a decision on the fly. I have to be intentional about what all will this implicate if this one decision is made. That seems so straightforward that maybe it's not. As far as transparency, I've been in a job for a little over 10 years that makes me known wherever I go. When I'm shopping with my family or going to church or going to an event in town, I run into people that know I'm a parole officer. And just because I'm off work and with my family does not mean that it changes how I'm known. And so for me, I try to be very intentional that who you see in the grocery store, at church, and gardening in my yard or wherever else is you see the same person. And like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. You're going to have to hold me accountable at some point, Dale, because we're human. But at the same time, I'm not one person with you and one person with another because of the fact that I can't remember who to be.
Yes. We saw some candidates like that. Yes. I'm glad to hear that you're not.
So it's just kind of one of those things that that's what transparency means to me. It's that you get what you see no matter where you see me.
Oh, and one other thing I wanted to be sure to add on to this, and I did with Dan as well. We'll talk some other time about sitting and watching something bad happen with the other commissioners and not saying anything. That's for another time, okay? But one of the things we do know has happened, because I go to a number of the sub-board meetings. That's not what they call them in Josephine County. It's there are advisory boards that meet, and they are responsible for doing the same thing. Even if the law didn't say they were supposed to, which it does, they are responsible for telling you when their meeting is going to happen and giving you the if not a transcript, at least some kind of written indication of their minutes. And I go and I videotape them sometimes, and some of them are very unhappy they're being videotaped. Hey, it's state law. Others are, hey, great, sure, wonderful. Tell everybody what we're doing. One of the things that's happening across the board with almost every advisory board is they're not obeying the law. They are required to tell you when they're going to meet. They're required to put out some kind of minutes. They're required to produce some kind of documents that they're looking at, and they don't do it. They just don't. In fact, it's rare to find one that does that on a consistent basis, especially. Can you see yourself at some point saying, without being, too much of a nudge about this, can you see yourself saying to these groups, now listen, we're obeying the law. Forget about what happened in the past, or try to. You must obey the law also. And it's not just because it's the law, it's because it's the right thing to do. Could you see yourself doing that?
Yes, but we also have to make a means for them to do that. So I went to one meeting that they were all experts in what they were there to talk about, but not one of them was a good minute taker. I mean, admittedly.
Yeah.
So it was upon them to keep their own minutes. And so they're, running the meeting, taking the minutes, and it's not their gifting. It's not their skill. And so the best course of action would honestly be for the county to provide the support services that every one of those meetings are recorded and transcribed, and the minutes be provided, and the agenda be provided and notified at a certain time, the minutes be published, and all of that be available.
That's an awful lot of work, but it's better than breaking the law.
But it is. But here's the other piece of it, Dale, is it takes money.
Yes,
so
it does.
You're hearing everybody saying prioritizing and top-down budgeting. Okay, so where does this budgeting come for the general specific stuff for the day-to-day? I believe those functions are important, but we also have to realize they take time and they take money.
Now, the other side of that argument is
the process just went down, and they're saying this is keeping functions going that are mandated and required.
Right.
They're like, well, some of this is that specific stuff that people are saying cut. They're not realizing the implications of what they would cut.
The other side of that argument is, because of our financial situation, we can't afford to obey the law.
Ever. You obey the law, but you realize there's a cost.
Yes. Well, now, here's what I would do. I would say to the secretary of the group, we're all going to obey the law now, fellas. Mostly fellas, but, women too. We're all going to obey the law.
What I was talking about was all fellas, so that was, and they admitted, I'm not good at this, but I'm going to do it.
Right. So first you need to do that and say that to the secretary. A couple meetings goes by and there's no minutes, or no one's being informed about when the meetings are going to happen, or the meetings change and they don't tell people. Then you say to that secretary, you're no longer on the board. Then you go to the head of that board and you say, it's now on you. And if that person can't do it, you dissolve the board, because you can't tolerate, should not tolerate, county government breaking the law under your venue, under your supervision.
Is it not the county's job, administrative function, to do all the notifications for those meetings?
It could be, and to put it on the website. Putting it on the website is so simple. Click here for advisory boards. And they should all be there, along with all the information, when they're going to meet, what happened to the last couple of meetings, what's coming up next. This is really simple. There's nobody that seems to have the heart to do that. Heck, we volunteered to do it. Volunteered for free. Volunteers that are willing to work for free are sometimes embraced with open arms and sometimes kicked across the room. We're the guys that are being kicked across the room. We need to know.
I definitely think that it makes sense to put it on the website, to make it available, and to have the accountability there. So that's not a problem. With volunteers, I organized volunteers before, and it's not always a consistent result.
No.
It's not. And so there's issues there, and you have to remember that everybody on these advisory boards are volunteers.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that's something that the fact they're coming out and they're volunteering their time, I don't want to disregard that either. That's a big deal. But the county, we can find a way to support them in that process so that they're meeting the law and that requirement. If if they're not given the opportunity to do it right, then that's where we have to come and say, let's help you do it right.
Right. Now, I just was looking at my notes. I do understand a little bit about showing up on time, and this is our 513th show in a row. We've never ever missed one, and we're not sponsored by anybody, and there's no advertising on this show or on this website. We're only doing it for what gain? To try to make it a better community. And some of these things that I'm asking, especially tonight, are dead simple. I mean, law, not obey the law. Honesty, not honesty. Transparency, not transparency. These are the most dead basic things. And if we could solve that problem, except for the occasional time where there's a hiccup in something, that's understandable. That's human nature, okay? But if we could solve that problem, we'd be so much further ahead, because you probably know that even SOS and Cuff said the last time around on trying to promote a levy, that they didn't want the commissioners involved, and they told them why. Because your reputation for honesty is down around your ankles. So, that's my word. But, it was awful. And so here you are going into a situation, you're coming in from the city council, which isn't held in high esteem by everybody in the county, as you know. And now you're coming into being a county commissioner, and their reputation for, the motto generally is, I know we're breaking the law and I don't care. And so there's going to be some doubting, and from me and from Mike as well, and from our audience, how nice it would be to relax, as we've done with the new, let's say good things, as we've done with the new head person in the commissioner's office, Wendy Watkins, as we've done with the new person in the clerk's office. There are people where you go, all right, that's what we need, and then we don't need to worry about the clerk anymore. That's a wonderful place to be.
Well, all we can do is, when we get in there, is do it right.
Yes, ma'am.
That's pretty simple.
I think that it is. And then we can concentrate more on the nuts and bolts of individual decisions. That would be nice if that's what we were talking about. Oh, well, I kind of disagree with you. Not disagreeing about what is being honest and what is not being honest. Good golly. Really? It's gotten down to that basic? It has. And so then if we could be talking more about policy issues, what a blessing that would be for the whole county.
We're going to get there.
I want to believe that. Okay, I want to believe that. So thank you for talking with us this evening. I'm hoping that we can arrange to do something similar to this maybe around June 10th, which is 2 weeks from today. A couple of times a month would be nice. And talk about another issue, and not just in glittering generalities, but when it gets down to the smaller details about why we should be optimistic with you coming into office.
Sure. I think they're good questions. And, the easy answer right now is that I know that I can't fix it alone, that it's going to take our whole community working together.
Yes.
But I know that's something we're going to have to talk about more.
Well, that's why sometime in the future, I'm going to ask you a question about a commissioner sitting there. You did not do that during the vote for the city sales tax, but there are plenty of times when you see a commissioner sitting there and I got another commissioner literally calling people names, not just me, but others, terrible names from the podium, and the other commissioners just sit there quietly and say nothing. I don't see how a human being can do that, much less a representative of the people. We'll talk about that next time or sometime thereafter. Not jumping on any individual commissioner, but what you would do in a somewhat similar circumstance.
Well, I hope I do the right thing, but again, I don't know.
All right.
We'll have to talk about that in the future. But yeah, there's been plenty of times I've stuck my neck out, and I stood up for what I thought was right, not what was popular.
Well, that's great. All right. Well, want to thank you very much for making your time available, especially since you just got in and talking with me here. And next time it'll probably be me and Mike. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from you. We certainly will. There's going to be some time lag here before November comes around, but here's a great opportunity for people to hear the dead simple ethical stand that you already know. You don't need to look it up in a book or in a law book or some briefing paper. You already know where you are, and that's a real advantage.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm not perfect, but I also know that the law, well, never mind. We've already talked about that.
We have.
So
now we know what your new motto is going to be. Vote for Lily Morgan. She's not perfect.
Well, no, but I do have experience showing that I will get the job done.
Good for you.
I will lead with respect, and I'll respect everybody that's coming in. I'm going to work on getting the jobs, and I'm going to help with public safety. But I can't do it without everybody in the community coming along and saying, how do we get this done?
Thank you. We really do care. However, thank you for your time, and we're hoping to see you again, if it's possible, next Friday the 10th. Good night.
We'll talk again. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining us.